Kstar is a concept that I developed to try to bridge the gap between various terminologies that I was encountering along my journey as a knowledge broker. I suddenly became aware that there was knowledge mobilization, and it was a question of, did knowledge mobilization mean the same thing as knowledge brokering? Were people using it differently? Knowledge management, that can be used to, in effect, deal with data management, or it can truly be knowledge management. There's knowledge transfer and exchange. What do all these terms mean? Well, ultimately I came to the conclusion it didn't really matter to me as a practitioner of trying to get science into policy and make sure that policy was able to influence the directions of science. It didn't really matter to me exactly what it was called or the nuance. The important thing was to actually do it. Now I know terminology is important to a lot of people, but the Kstar concept is to try to bring people together across various domains. Knowledge brokering as a concept really developed in the health field, for example. Knowledge mobilization has been used in the humanities in particular in various grant applications. So people have attached themselves to these terms perhaps without thinking terribly deeply. I certainly didn't think very deeply about it. Knowledge brokering fitted what my group did. Knowledge translation, knowledge brokering described to a T the two elements that we were doing. So that's what we went with, and we became very invested with it. We became evangelists for the term. But I became uncomfortable when I left Environment Canada, where I'd been working, and joined the United Nations University's Institute for Water, Environment and Health, where they were using the term knowledge management. To me, knowledge management in the Environment Canada sense really meant more about the data management and making sure that there were records that one could access and information wasn't lost. UNUNWA was using it in the true sense of that I believe knowledge management should be used. So I had cast around for a term that would bridge these gaps whilst acknowledging that they existed, but saying we need to move forward. We need to get beyond any sort of paralyzing language debates, because the field of Kstar risks balkanizing. It risks splitting apart into various areas. I became very aware that people were inventing toolkits and frameworks for their particular area without any regard for anything else. So I was working in the environmental sustainability field, borrowing from the health field, but all of a sudden I became aware that agriculture had been practicing Kstar for a long time. It was called extension work at the time. That the education sector was becoming invested in knowledge brokering, and all of these communities really weren't terribly aware of each other. I was aware through the Knowledge Brokers Forum that there was a very vital and active group of people in international development who are doing this, and as we've developed the conference, we found that there are many, many groups who are doing aspects of what we call Kstar, and they were completely unaware of what was going on in other parts of the world. Just recently I ran across a knowledge intermediaries and purveyors group, and they were totally new to me. They were doing something slightly different, but still on the Kstar spectrum. And that spectrum, if I look at it, deals with science communication for me in terms of the way that I think about Kstar. Others will think about it in their own context, of course. From big C communication to little c communication. Big C communication being the corporate communication where the science is pushed out to the general public and to the media, but really without any attention being paid to whether that information push has any effect. I'm more interested in the policy pull. So trying to look at little c communications aspects of knowledge translation, knowledge transfer, knowledge brokering. So I think that the Kstar concept, although yes, it's another term in this whole myriad of terms, really tries to say, forget the terminology, let's try to concentrate on making sure that the field is valued, is understood, because there are people who don't understand the value of this field, and that we get our act together as the Kstar community and actually practice what we preach, making sure that we bridge those gaps across sectors, across geographies. I'm really excited by the fact that we've been able to bring together so many people from across the world, from 20 countries, 6 continents. Antarctica was a bit of a stretch, we couldn't get anyone from there. And almost an equal number of sectors, something like 20 different sectors. So this is the first time, to my knowledge, that we've had this sort of multi-sectoral, international, global conference devoted to Kstar issues, whether you call it knowledge brokering, knowledge translation, knowledge mobilization, transfer and exchange, management, whatever you want. So the first step is bringing the people together and seeing what happens. I think that's very exciting because a lot of these people have never heard of each other. As we were pulling together the conference, we came across a whole number of different communities who were all developing their own toolkits, their own tools in the Kstar field without any reference to what had been done before, or in other countries, or in other sectors. So being able to assemble that information as we have done in the draft annotated green paper has already been, I think, a very important thing. And after the conference, we want to further develop the green paper, having input from people who have participated either via the web connection directly, people who couldn't come to the conference but are interested. And we had a waiting list of over 120 people, of people who would have liked to come or wanted to be kept informed about the conference. So that's a great start. And we'll have people build that green paper until it becomes something that is really tangible and solid. There'll be sections in there to deal with the terminology issues, which are important, as I say, but not the focus of this conference. So if somebody wants to define precisely knowledge translation or knowledge mobilization as they see it, they'll have the opportunity to do so online. Once we have that paper whipped into shape, then we want to produce a white paper that can be used either for individual organizational needs, to make the case for Kstar in an organization, or for our collective needs as a community, because I think there are collective needs for this community. One of the things that we hope to do is to bring together an overarching website. So if somebody's searching for Kstar tools and they want to know if a particular tool to do something exists, they'll be able to cross-cut all of the sites that already house tools. We're not trying to supplant anything that anyone has done, but bring it together in a cohesive fashion. If somebody wants to say, what are all the tools in the education sector, they should be able to do that via this site. We'd like to continue the dialogue, perhaps have meetings in the future. I'd love professionalization of the field, for example. I think that's kind of important, that there is recognition of the value of what a Kstar practitioner does, what an intermediary does. So that's very important. And as a community, I think it's extremely important that we demonstrate the value of Kstar, because we need solid metrics that we've had an impact, not just that we've produced X number of policy briefs. Have those policy briefs had an impact? How have they had an impact? And then we can use that to demonstrate to the people who are paying for these kind of activities why it's so important. A good friend of mine, Andrew Campbell, developed the concept of funding the arrows, and he ran a large organization in Australia called Land and Water Australia. And he realized that people fund projects, so the boxes are the projects, but nobody funded the interaction amongst those projects, the flow of knowledge from the producers of the knowledge to the users of the knowledge, allowing the users of the knowledge to say to the producers, hey, that's great, but what we really want is this kind of information. So that's another kind of output that we'd like to have, is some solid metrics around Kstar so we can demonstrate its value and make sure that it's an activity that is funded as opposed to is the easiest to cut when it comes to funding cuts. Ultimately, I'd like to see this professionalization of the field. I'd like to see a community practice. I'd like to see a far bigger conference, because we were told that there were hundreds of people who would have really liked to attend this. So maybe the next one will be 400 people, and we can discuss some of these ideas further. This is a first step in this field, and I'm so delighted by the uptake and participation, not only from the people who are attending it, but the people who, very importantly, have supported it so avidly and so fully.